Yeah. So, welcome to today's episode of Productive Agent. My name is Rob Aubrey. I am your host of the Productive Agent podcast, and the podcast is sponsored by Aubrey Home Loans. So, and today we have a special guest, Stephen Hughes. He's a top producer, been in the business just 3 years. So, welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. I love, and I say this almost every episode, if not every episode. When I started this idea, one of the unintended consequences or benefits, I guess, was I just get to hang around with people all the time. I mean, we get to meet each other and hang around with cool people. I mean, I'm like, I didn't, when I was developing the plan, I'm like, well, it didn't even dawn on me. Yeah, I'm going to hang around with cool people. And so that's been a real benefit to me, especially in the day and age where everything's text and whatnot, to get to spend face-to-face time with somebody, it's pretty cool. So Steven's been in the business 3 years. And and you just said you closed 55 transactions in the previous 12 months. So, I got to take my hat off to that, Steven. That's pretty awesome. There's a lot of people out there that are struggling, and here you are. You just must have the blinders on and not watch the news. That's all I can think of. And how did you get in real estate? Tell us about that.
It's kind of a funny story. I am not originally from Utah. I moved here about 11 years ago. I went to grad school at the University of Utah. Had a full ride and everything to do a master's in music. I'd been a band director, kind of got recruited out here. I graduated. I freelanced as a drummer and percussionist, taught a lot of private lessons, worked at a few schools. And I had an opportunity to be in one of the military bands. Like I had auditioned and won it. And during that transition, I took a summer job because I was basically closing up my music stuff here. I ended up not doing the military because I have a shoulder injury from a car accident years ago, and they wouldn't let me in. But I took a summer job installing real estate signs and signposts.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, I interacted with a lot of different agents and brokers. And I'd had a previous incident when I was renting, and I had actually filed an ethics complaint against an agent, and that didn't proceed. That preceded this summer job, maybe a year or two before, so it was kind of fresh in my mind. And I met a lot of agents and homeowners, and I was really interested in it. I just didn't quite know what people were doing, how they were doing it. Really, housing and real estate, none of that stuff had been on my mind. I wasn't
Right.
like so many agents say just kind of the typical tropey stuff like, oh, I just want to help someone buy their own home, or I love looking at homes. Like just kind of this um I don't know what the word is, like saccharine kind of
Right.
disingenuous universal thing. But I just was fascinated. I'm like, why do people hire people to sell their houses? And I just didn't know anything. So I just started
Right.
reading, and I'd already been kind of in sales because of music. I'd read sales books, and I started watching a lot of YouTube videos. And I just made a decision to try it and get my license. And it really grew from there.
Wow. So that was it. So trying it, well, you've done well at it, you know. So what would you say, so you're not from here. So how long have you lived here now?
Um, I've lived here for 11 years.
Okay, 11 years. So you muddled around with other things, music and whatnot, right? And you went
Sure.
to school and all that. And so, but then just in 3 years, you've grown to close 55 transactions in a year. So, I mean, that's significant volume. And, so what would you say, you know, tell us how you got to that path. I mean, so what did you do your first year?
Um, I'll tell you, my first year, I would say, so I did the coursework, like the 120 hours, and I went to schedule my test, but then COVID happened, which is kind of a funny thing. And then I couldn't
Right.
take my test. So it was delayed a couple months, and I did it in May. And then I started doing the whole looking for a brokerage thing, and I found a brokerage, and I was with them. And it took me, I think, 4 months to get my first deal. And it was a buyer deal. They asked me to help them, and they kind of knew me. It was very just happenstance random. And I muddled my through it,
Right.
trying to fill out the purchase contract and all that. Even though I'd sit through the courses and all that, I still didn't know.
No, you can study the book all you want, but like in a hockey game, until you put the skates on and get out there and start skating, none of that matters.
Yeah, and I luckily had at the time a pretty good broker, and then there was a couple older agents. So I'm like, "Can you help me?" And they're just like, "Yeah, it's fine." And they
Right.
were in my office. Um, and then I had a second and third transaction. They had a program for new agents. I can't think of the name of it. I want to say it's like continuing mastery or something like that, where basically you had to take a weekly call with the broker, and then they did some brokerage classes, and your split was lower, but after your first four transactions you got a higher split.
Right.
I was very dedicated to try to get out of debt around this time too. I'm like, well, if I'm going to do this and there's all this money, then I need to get out of debt. So I really pushed to get the fourth deal, and I was able to do all four deals by the end of 2020.
Okay. Because you
2021.
started in because you didn't even take your test till May, so
Mm,
you started maybe June. So in
yeah,
6 months you closed the 4 deals.
correct. Correct. And then the fourth deal, and this is where I guess I'm going to kind of give a trajectory of my journey and where I'm at, and then feel
Sure.
free to interrupt me and ask for clarification. My fourth deal is actually a mobile home, and that's probably one of the biggest things I do. Is I do a lot of mobile home transactions.
Okay.
Um, they are significantly, I think they're significantly harder than your standard house. You don't have the
Somewhat. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have the structure with the title company. You're dealing with different socioeconomic and demographic issues, and then the
Right.
financing side is as I think, a little bit more complex. It's
The
unique.
what side?
The financing side of
Oh,
things.
fine. Yeah, financing mobile homes is yeah, it's a different beast when you talk to those lenders.
Yeah, and it's not to say that there's not hard stuff in real estate, but
Right.
uh, compared to your general real estate transaction, and I immediately got into just really hard situations. Um, and I muddled my way through that, but I was really fascinated by it. So I did a few more of them, and I got connected to some people in the mobile home industry. And what I ended up figuring out, and I did some coaching in the real estate space. I had a couple of different coaches, and I read a lot of books. I really got focused on figuring out niches.
Right.
And what I have now is over the course of 3 years, I really have pared down my business into kind of four areas. There's mobile homes, there is senior housing, where basically you have downsizers or
Right.
people looking to move into assisted living and memory care. I kind of fell into that one by accident, and then I've had a couple probate things because of that as well. Um, Divorce. I actually just did a divorce transaction 3 weeks ago, and then bankruptcy is probably my newest area, just because I get so many buyer leads, and it's so many people who are in the middle of bankruptcy.
Right.
Shockingly, or their credit and debt so bad, it's actually a pretty fair option for them to proceed with a bankruptcy, whether that's Chapter 7 or 13. And I've just made a lot of referral partners and connections. Most of my business is through online leads, through marketing, because I have like the TikTok thing, the YouTube. I have a couple click funnels, and then referrals through partners or people I've done business with. But I still prospect. I get on KSL. I still reach out to FISBOs. I still reach out to the listing agents on expireds.
Right.
I don't call the sellers directly. That's like a whole philosophy thing that we could unpack if you wanted. Um, and most of my business is listings. I've had a couple of buyers, but really I'm so busy and that it's really hard for me to work with buyers unless
Right.
they're ready to go, or they're, as I say, they're willing to listen to me. If they're
Right.
going to be argumentative or not do what we ask, I almost can't help a buyer because I don't have
Right.
time for it. A listing's a bit different because I have like one gal, for example, right now. Looks like we're going to do a short sale. That's what it's for,
Wow. You don't hear that too often.
through Utah Housing, and that's already been an adventure, And that kind of was on. She found me after her divorce, so it kind of tied into that niche. But what's funny is these niches are all what I call hardship real estate. It's people with financial or litigation,
Right.
and I think that's something that the industry still is severely lacking. I mean, we have 18,000 agents in our MLS on utahrealestate.com.
Right.
And the stuff I'm doing, I know one guy who specializes in divorce, and he's awesome. Really, really good at it. And then there's only a couple other people that, can do mobile homes that I trust. They
Right.
don't do volume as me, but like I've referred to a couple of those agents before. I don't know anyone who's in the bankruptcy game. Seniors, there's some people that have there's a designation. It's the senior real
Yeah.
estate
That
specialist.
doesn't mean they're any good at it.
Yeah, I have it, and I think there are some people who say, "Oh, I work with seniors," but I think it's more like it's just their peer group because they're
Yeah,
in
they're
that.
SY, right.
Yeah, they're just in that demographic. But because that's a whole different industry. Like I have a booth in September or October at the Utah Senior Conference in Sandy at the Mountain America Center.
Right.
That thousands and thousands of people come to it, and I'm the only real estate person there. So I've got like that kind of thing. So I guess to summarize my answer, just over the past 3 years, I really focused on building a referral base niches. And
Right.
this is not complete. I mean, there's stuff I'm still growing right now.
Oh yeah.
Say on the prospecting side, and referral partner side.
Yeah. When you mentioned listings is more scalable than buyers. You know, the key to buyers is you know, people always want to hire a buyer's agent. I always say before you hire a buyer's agent, hire a showing agent. And
Mm-hmm.
then so then what the it, when you hire a showing agent, you can almost because you don't want to give away, you don't want to bring a buyer's agent in. You're going to get because you're giving away, you're paying them 50% at least, right? And then it just doesn't always work out numerically. But if you can just bring somebody in, get them to sign a buyer agency contract, get their loan approved, and then just have somebody show them houses. And then when they're ready to write an offer, it comes back to you. You negotiate the deal, and then you hand it over to whoever's processing your files.
Right.
So you can scale buyers almost as easy as a listings with a showing agent. And seeing a showing agent, you only need to pay them like 20-25%.
Right.
And that works. So, and so tell me about your prospecting. So you call for sale by owners, you said?
Well, so there's been a bit of a journey through that. When I first started, I did the whole dialer thing where you're cold
Right.
calling, the dialer's rolling.
Right.
And I have a lot of opinions on that in the real estate coaching industry. People really have been sold a bill of goods.
Right.
I mean, you show me the solo agent, not just in this state, but in this country that's doing 50 plus deals, just doing FISBOs and expireds cold calling. And that they can't produce that person. It's one lead pillar on a team. I mean,
Right.
I've seen it because I've been asked to join a couple of these companies and stuff as a coach, and I just am like, no, because I don't believe in the product. But um, some of the stuff's free. I mean, if they're on KSL Facebook Marketplace, I'll always message them. I've gotten a few listings that way. The short sale one, that's a real house. She
Right.
was a FISBO,
Right.
and I have a CRM FISBO campaign. Then I have a YouTube playlist.
Right.
It's really relaxed. I mean, it's like 10 or 15 minutes a
Right.
week. I probably could cold call all of them, but my niche side of my business is so productive. I really don't have the time for it.
No. Yeah. Once you've zeroed in, you don't have to go in all those unless you have, until you bring people in and leverage yourself to where then you have time to go do something else. But if you're so do you use a transaction coordinator or anything?
No, and I think that's where like kind of going back on this prospecting thing, I'm a one man show.
Right.
I have had a transaction coordinator in the past. Again, I'm a very opinionated person, which some people don't like, but
Welcome to real estate.
but there's a reason I'm successful is because I have opinions.
Right.
I find the transaction coordination job description to be highly controversial. I don't think it's as conducive to my business as if I had a assistant or, like you said, a showing agent.
Right.
We're in the middle of starting to interview people. I am. So it's just
Right.
because I do need help because I'm leaving money on the table on the buyer side, and I need more time to prospect because right
Right.
now I have 21 listings right
Wow.
now. 3 of those are under contract. One's withdrawn, but it's about to go back to active. There's kind of a story there, but Um,
There's always a story.
right.
People, there's a story is why people move.
Hmm.
Birth to birth, marriage, divorce, birth, death, you know,
Right.
got a job, kids move out, kids move back with kids, you know.
Well, I think that's the thing with the prospecting with the areas I am focused on are these are people who need to sell,
Right.
not want to sell.
No,
And there's a
you have to be highly motivated.
yep. There's well, it's not an easy thing. It's not just like, oh, I'm just gonna sell my house. Like that's not
No.
how it works. It's but so many agents are taught that in the coaching industry, or just you feel that way intuitively. Uh I do make some cold calls because I get some online leads. So well, I don't
Right.
even cold call. Like if it's an online inquiry, I call and talk to them on the phone.
Right.
Or there's a text. And of course, I've got the email and text message CRM thing, but we have to get permission for that, of course, when they first are put in. Like it's automatically like, hey, do you consent to this? That way we're
Right.
compliant with the law. Um, the new thing I am about to do is I did just buy some data for downsizers and divorce that goes through some pretty interesting stuff to basically figure out people who are likely to sell in those demographics,
Right.
like file for divorce or if they've been in a home so long, certain type of home, these things.
Right.
Then it's cross referenced against the do not call list.
Right.
So I am going to try that. I don't know if I'll like it, but at least it's like really targeted. The
Right.
problem with cold
They,
calling the FISBOs and expires is so many other people are calling them.
oh
And
yeah.
it's almost impossible to stand out. People will say, "Oh, you just got to be unique." Well, you really can't when there's dozens of people doing it.
Well, the trick to that is, so there's dozens of people that call the first day,
Hmm.
you know, so and then by the time a week or 10 days rolls around, there's only one or two still calling them.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So, the way you stand out is just follow up. So because I always ask this question: if you got face to face with 20 sellers a month, would your business improve?
Oh, it's always a yes. Yeah, of
So,
course.
right. I mean, I knew the answer, right?
Right,
So then I always say, well, then all you got to do is knock on one for sale by owner door a day.
right.
I mean, literally, if you did that one a day, I mean, where you actually spoke to somebody, you might have to knock on a few. But if you did that one a day, at some point, with some skill and practice, I mean, there's no reason you couldn't do two or three a month.
I don't disagree with that. It's not my focus, but I'll tell
Right.
you, they all list. They
Oh, they
almost.
do.
I
I coached an agent years ago, and this was back when it was only 7-digit dialing. There was do not call or anything like that. And so I gave him the old stack of for sale by owners. And I said, I want you to call these all day. And then, at the end of the day, I'm like, what happened? He goes, well, they were all listed. I'm like, great. Tomorrow, when you call the new ones and they say they'll never list with an agent, I want you to remember what happened today. They all listed.
I've kicked myself in the butt because I think in the past with the FISBOs, if we're going to be specific on that, where I didn't follow up with someone and they went and
Right.
listened to somebody.
Right.
No. The CRM helps me because it can help cover the gaps because
Right.
realistically, some weeks are busier than others, and it can
Sure.
be hard to get every single person.
Well, and we
Um,
have seasonality, so you have busier seasons. So that obviously, if you're doing 55, so let's just say, that let's just say 48, 4 deals a month. Well, you don't close 4 deals every month. Some months you're closing 6 or 7, and some months you're closing 1 and 2. So the 6 and 7 months are just like you're extremely busy.
yep, it's very true. So the CRM is there. I didn't do the
What CRM do you use out if you don't mind?
I use Lion Desk. It's fine. I've
Right.
thought about switching to Active Campaign. The problem is I have to rebuild all of my stuff.
Right. I use Active Campaign. I love it.
Yeah, everyone I talk to in other parts of the country are like, if you're doing the ClickFunnels and online, you've got Zapier. If you're really wanting to get people that are followed up with automatically for several
Right.
years, you got to switch to Active Campaign. I
It's a
mean,
pain in the butt, but
I've
you
seen.
can
Yeah,
hire a virtual assistant to help you create all those campaigns.
yeah, I guess I could.
Like you can get a virtual assistant that's really good for like $5 or $6 an hour.
Yes, yes.
that
Uh,
works out of the Philippines.
right, right.
Food for thought.
I've had a guy do some graphic design for me in Bangladesh.
Right.
So yeah, I guess I could do that. Yeah, I might have to think about that because
One of the
personally,
things, one of the
uh,
things I like about Active Campaign is, are you familiar with Facebook custom audiences?
yes.
So Active Campaign, you can actually set people that don't open your email, push them into a custom audience on Facebook to where you can almost run the email almost as an ad. So if they're not opening your email, now you can push it in front of them.
Oh, interesting.
That's a
Interesting.
pretty powerful tool.
Yeah, I bet. I just started over the beginning of this year running some Facebook ads because
Right.
I did it a long time ago for music and it was good for me. But adjusting it to real estate's been a little bit of a learning experience. Facebook's kind of weird with the real estate side of things.
Right. Well, real estate marketing is it's an interesting animal,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not like you run an ad and people go, oh, that's cool. I mean, if there's something for $7, I wasn't in the market for it, I still might buy it. I'm like, well, that's cool, you know, but real estate, I mean, because the reality is real estate, we're not really selling houses per se. We're looking for people that are selling houses. I mean, that's it. I mean, really, our only job is to find, not our only job, but our number one job is to find people that are moving and then figure out who's moving and find them.
Right.
Because if they're not moving, they're not moving. And you can study all script and science of language patterns and whatnot till the cows come home. There's nothing, you can't sit at my table and use a good script on me to convince me to pack my stuff and move unless I'm moving. Right. I mean, if I'm not moving, I'm not moving. And there's nothing you could say. I mean, well, you could offer me enough money and I'll move, but the odds are great. You're not going to say anything to get me to move unless I'm already moving.
I agree with that. That's always the issue I took with some of the old real estate coaching stuff. Like, you probably know what circle prospecting is. You
Oh,
probably
yeah,
heard,
absolutely.
and that's the problem there. It's like, oh well, people say all kinds of stuff, and you're supposed to follow up with them. It's like, couldn't your time be better invested going after
Right.
what we would call a high probability lead?
Hmm. Like
Someone
Pisbo's and expireds, right?
that is going to move,
Right.
or it's the reason I'm looking at divorce now and like and then getting some of that stuff is the stats are insane for the number of them that have to sell the house, especially now
Right.
that interest rates are high. They can't refinance the other spouse anymore. It just doesn't.
Right. Doesn't
You're gonna,
work.
you're just going to have to, and this is where maybe some of the businesses maybe a certain way. A lot of people in this business and in Utah, I'm going to kind of slam a little bit. They're overly optimistic about the market.
Right.
This market is not, the crazy multiple offer, all this stuff. It is in
A
a
little bit, but it's not like it was.
no. From what I see, the homes that do have a multiple offer, it's like in Salt Lake County or Utah County, and they priced it pretty low in the homes.
Right.
But
Yeah,
I
not like it was. I mean, there's
uh,
still activity like that, you know. And that's what I tell sellers, look, you can't underprice it,
yeah,
because if you do, it'll bid up, but
right,
you can overprice it because then it languishes and then becomes shop worn, and I say, look, if let's say it's worth 500 and you list at 530 and then you wait 30 days and then we adjust the price, well, then the motivated buyers are going to say something's wrong with it. So now they're going to start offering you 475, where if you would have just listed at 500, you might have got two bids and got 510 out of it.
right, right.
So, it's the age old game. We got to list high so we can come down. It's like, well, no, you don't list low. Like I said, you can't underprice it. It'll go up. But
It's that's I've had that conversation so many times with people,
right.
and but it's a business decision. Sometimes you can't convince them, and
Nope.
uh, I'd rather have the listing than not.
Right. 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 Yeah. I'll
Uh,
take it. If the motivation's high enough, I'll
right.
take it overpriced because I can outlast them.
Oh, exactly. I mean, it's just how it is sometimes.
Right.
especially now in this transition. But I don't know what the future will hold. I think we'll see a lot more adjustments as we keep going, where it'll be harder
Right.
sell and buy. That's my gut feeling.
Yes. Sell and buy is tough. I mean, it's not too bad right now, but if rates, let's say if rates drop 1%, sell and buy is going to be a challenge like it was before.
Yeah.
You're just going to have to sell, get short-term rental, and then try and buy.
Yeah. Unless you're moving out of the state somewhere
Right.
else,
That's different. Right.
where it's like you have more flexibility. But
Well,
as
the
you,
idea of making a move, pack your stuff in a truck and drive across town and move into your new home all in one day. That's the challenge right there.
oh, it's like, yeah, you're correct. It's still not possible.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I always say possible, not probable.
no, yeah, okay. I guess that's a better way of saying it. Because sure, it could happen. There's always a chance.
Right. I mean, yeah. Well, you sell hope. I always sell hope on the listing appointment, but then as soon as they sign it, then I start talking about plan B,
Sure.
because you want to sell plan A to get them to hire you. And then and then now that they've hired you, okay, now let me show you what could go wrong, So,
That makes sense.
because
That
if you
makes
tell them all the things that can go wrong up front, because here's the thing, you can tell them that God's honest truth, right? And then another guy comes along and tells them what they want to hear, they get the listing. Doesn't mean they're a better agent than you. They just told them what they wanted to hear. So I always say, look, just sell the dream, but make sure they understand the pitfalls. And like I said, if they're motivated enough, take the listing. Who cares?
Oh, that's kind of how I feel. It's
Right.
like they need to sell, they want to sell. Okay, yeah, and they're flexible with it. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool, let's do it. And then, they'll know the market eventually gives them information where they're going to listen
Right.
to your
Yep.
market always responds.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, and that's, I mean, and that's, I mean, until, until sellers get real. So I always say, here's the way I phrase it. If the seller owns the property free and clear, property's in mint condition, right? And the seller has a place to, and it's vacant, and the buyer's got 25% down, 10 years at a W-2 job, doesn't have any other debt. Well, then, you and I are out of work. But that's not the case, you know.
Right.
So I always say count your lucky stars that these are difficult transactions. They're emotional. People start, they start freaking out over $100 items. It's like, ay, ay, ay.
Yes.
That's why we're in business. That's why, that's the whole value of a real estate is literally leading people through the process. Because that's what they don't teach, in all the training is they don't teach leadership. They don't teach the leading process because that's what families need.
Right.
Right? You got a family that lives here. You got a husband, wife, 3 kids, cat, dog, and a turtle, and they need to live here. Well, that's a project. So you got to be a leader and a project manager. That's after to me, the sale is them signing the agency contract. That's
Right.
the sale. After that, it's service.
I agree with that. I mean, it's funny. Another word I would use for it, and it's probably because I used to be a public school teacher, is just like you really do have to educate people.
Yep, absolutely.
I mean, I have on my YouTube a few playlists. I have one for mobile homes. I'm starting to build out the bankruptcy and divorce ones, but I did just a general buyer one. It's like 17 videos. And now I've got a seller.
So how long are they? Just little short videos?
1 or 2 minutes. I
Yeah.
mean, what it was is basically, and I'm doing this for sellers now. I finally finished the PowerPoint. I just sit down and record all of it, and then I cut it up into a bunch of videos. It's like,
Got
hey,
it.
watch the whole playlist, or click the video that's relevant to you, or maybe I'll send an individual video.
Right.
Because I don't know anyone else doing that.
Not like that. That's a brilliant idea.
Well, it's just it's newer. I mean, the YouTube channel. It's funny. I had it ever since I first started. I didn't really do anything with it until May of last year, 2022. I had like 3 subscribers. I'm up to 152 now, which is okay.
Right.
but it's just daily. I do a short video every day.
Right.
It's TikTok, and then we repost it on Facebook, Instagram, and
YouTube.
YouTube Shorts, Monday through Friday. And right now, it's a bunch of generic stuff with because I'm trying to flood the hashtags,
Right.
generic stuff, and then I'll get more specific here in the next year with
Right.
the video shorts. But it's always about leading them to the YouTube channel, so then they see those longer videos. I mean, even my CRM's tied into those
Right.
YouTube. The ClickFunnels are tied into those YouTube videos. Um, we have the hashtags and other stuff on that, and keywords. The important keywords. I have like a couple probate videos, just all that stuff. And I think over time, my idea is I want, because I've been through the home buying process.
Right.
It can be nerve wracking. And even as an agent, it's really difficult to cover every single thing with someone every single time.
Right. It's yeah. Well, because everybody's circumstance is unique. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of overlapping redundancy, but it's the individual person and their story and their situation that brings in the uniqueness of the transaction.
Well, and I think that's what you have to focus on as an agent. But then it
Right.
can get muddled with all this general stuff. So it's like, hey, if I can cover like 80% of the general stuff through them
Yep.
watching the videos, then I can help with the other 20% so that they feel not only served, but fully informed.
Right.
That's really important to me because it just never feels good when you're an agent and your client's just like, I just don't understand this. I don't know what's going on.
Right.
You're just like, wow, I did a bad job. I didn't explain this to well enough. So
I like what you just said there. It's kind of like you took responsibility. So, in other words, you're like, I didn't do the good job. You know what I mean? In other words, rather than blame them, it's like you took responsibility. I love that. And I find that successful people are always, they just take responsibility for everything. They don't, in other words, they don't blame other people.
right.
I mean, that's a waste of time.
Well, it just isn't going to get resolved. It's funny.
No,
Um,
then it's
yeah.
an excuse not to improve yourself.
Well, you're just going to eventually going to flounder. And
Right.
well, my dad has a saying, and I don't know if this is exactly relevant, but it's something I think of almost daily as of late. When you start to be successful and you're building and you're growing and getting better, my dad used to say, you need to be nice to the people on your way up because you might need them if you go back down.
That's right.
And I think it keeps me a little bit grounded to
Right.
client. I'm not like aloof or
Right.
think like, oh, I've done this a million times, blah, blah, blah. Now, sometimes I will say, hey, I've done this a few times. I know it feels weird, but like it works this way for this reason.
Right.
That's why I'm not worried about it. I can understand why it stresses you out, though. That's like something that could come up, right? That's just trying to be confident as professional.
Right.
Because they're not the professional; they haven't lived through it. And I
Right.
think the thing is,
I mean, they might have bought a house 8 years ago, but the whole process is different than it was.
it's changed in 8 years. And what's funny is, I think about agents in general because I know this is about like being a productive agent. I think part of the reason I'm successful is because I've had so many transactions. I basically have just like lived through so many different circumstances and
Right.
stories and deals that I've covered a lot of stuff. So I would say a majority of stuff is kind of routine now, but
Right.
it's never 100%. It's just never 100%.
No, it's back to that individual.
Right.
Again, it's the human factor that is you can't generalize.
Right. Well, and I think just talking about being when you say generalize, it makes me think back to just kind of how I started focusing on niches.
Right.
This is just a business thing, and a lot of people say it, but I think there's truth. There's so many agents trying to just be, the number one realtor, or I'm your referral realtor, I'm your family realtor, I'm your neighborhood realtor, I'm your city real. I mean, all
Right.
these really generic general things. And it's like if you want to be full time and make money and be successful, you can't be general like that because you'll be
No.
lost.
Yeah. Who makes more money, the general practitioner doctor or the guy, the surgeon that does like one thing, you know?
Always, yeah.
So
It's
I remember reading a book on, I forget what it was called, but it was about niches. And, he was describing a guy that had a niche was he kind of had like a junkyard of heavy machinery equipment. So, because people needed a part, it could take like weeks to get it from a manufacturer and they were super expensive. And he'd have that part out in the yard and people would pay him handsomely just to get that part because they got a machine sitting there not working, and they're like, might cost $20,000 for the part. And he might have one out in the, he might have paid 20,000 for a broken machine, and he's getting $10,000 a part, but he made the story was I forget it was a long time ago. And, but it was a niche and that was his niche,
Yeah.
Heavy equipment kind of junkyard.
Well, it's having no competition is nice. I had a meeting
Right.
this morning with an attorney I haven't done business with. We were only supposed to meet for 10 or 15 minutes. We talked for about 40. And he said, he goes, you really are unique. He said, most realtors I can't stand. He goes,
Right.
they're just traditional people with this and that. I said, well, I'm not really like that. I said, I fell into these hard ship things and I like it. And I said, on a business side of things, honestly, it's really nice not to have competition.
Right.
Really nice. And I said, and it's nice to know that I can be a professional in an area that you also focus on. Because
Right.
we were talking about mostly bankruptcy and divorce. We talked a little bit about probate, but that's another conversation. But it was interesting because I don't really know anyone competing with me. Now, granted, there'll probably be someone who watches this and like, oh, I want to get into it. And hey, go ahead. I
Right.
actually need people in it because it would help me actually to have other
Right.
people doing it
Oh
always
yeah. If
does.
you had three or four, you can actually talk to what's working, what's not.
Right. And I have that the mobile home side of things, but I
Right.
don't have it in some of these other areas. Which
Yeah.
is
Bankruptcy is an interesting beast. Like as a lender, I mean, I have programs we can do them right after bankruptcy. Of course, it's going to cost more money. You know, a lot is like chapter 13. If they're in a chapter 13 and their payments have been on time for 12 months, they can buy another house, or
yep,
they can buy a home. The trustee has to sign up. The challenge with that is though, is usually the trustee, you have to have a property under contract for the trustee to agree to.
right.
And that's a challenge because people aren't going to go under contract with you for the experiment of getting a trustee to agree. So
Hmm.
it's kind of like that becomes a challenge. So, there's always I always say there's always a workaround, you know, and that's where just find a problem and solve it.
Well, yeah. I mean, and so many people aren't willing to solve a problem. I mean, I had a listing and the buyer ends up they were getting divorced and stuff, and this person had an agent, and it ended up falling through. But it was really, I'll say it bluntly, it was really the buyer agent's fault. And it's
Right.
because they didn't know what they're doing. And this agent lamented to me, "I'll never work with someone going through a divorce again." I'm like, really?
Right. They're not
Like
that hard. You just have to understand the situation.
but they weren't willing to. They wanted to turn and burn it.
Right.
Just like, oh, and blah blah blah, 3% in the
Well, and
money.
yeah. And that's mostly everybody.
Yeah, and so it blew up in his face.
Right.
You
That's
know,
that's how I became a CE instructor. I got my CE license about, I think it was 2010. And I had been involved in a situation. I was the listing agent. And so I we had three offers on the table. Wasn't a multiple offer market like we saw recently, but we wound up with three offers on there. It was just one of those properties that was going to do it. And so one of them came in low, so we just kind of discounted them out. The other two were kind of neck and neck, and we were trying to buy another property. So I told the agent, I said, look, we have to be subject to finding another property. He goes, well, we can't do that. And I'm like, well, why not? And I said, where does your buyer live now? The buyer lived in the parents' basement. I'm like, they're the perfect candidate that can wait. And so he says, well, just do a lease back or something like that. I said, well, that doesn't solve our problem. And he goes, well, what's your problem? I said, well, we have to find another house. That's our problem. And we didn't go under contract with him. He had a great buyer. The other buyer, I think they were equal, but But it dawned on me probably 2 or 3 days later after we were under contract. I said, you know, I believe he didn't understand the process and his buyer lost out because we wound up going out and putting a house under contract in like 4 or 5 days. And then we marched through and closed it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so that day I decided to start teaching CE classes because I felt bad. The agent, I thought he was good. He sounded good, but he just wasn't trained,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Well,
and I felt bad for his clients.
I have felt there's a little bit of mix for me here. You can tell some agents who haven't been trained, but they
Right.
want. I've had some that aren't good or aren't trained and they're total jerks. So then I just like have a hard time feeling sympathy for them. I
Right.
just want to go through the transaction. I've had a fair amount of jerks. But I've had a few where they're just like, I'm brand new and I just don't know. Like,
Right. Tell me that. I'll help you all the way.
and I try to help them. But I've had a couple, this has happened twice this year, where they're like, my broker, this and that. And I call the broker and I'm like, so I'm working with so and so. And it's like, do y'all just not do training over there anymore? Because I
Yeah.
know one of the blah, blah, blahs. And, they always get defensive. And I said, look, I'm just going to be blunt with you. She sounds nice. And y'all are going to take 35-40% of her commission. So I mean, this is pretty bold of me. This is how I am. I'm not a Utah person. It's like you need to do your job and actually help her out. I don't want to hear it again from her while we're in the
Right.
transaction and you're not helping her. You
Right.
got it. And all of a sudden, it's a different tune.
Right.
But and that can get into kind of the culture of our state, and then just I think there's a severe lack of business acumen.
Yeah. The whole broker model changed. When I first got into business back in the early 90s, brokers, although your license was statewide, like I lived in South Florida. Florida is so big. I mean, you can drive, it take you 15 hours to drive one end to the other. And that's not even counting going around to the panhandle,
Mm-hmm.
and so, and they got 21 million people. So yeah, your license is statewide, but brokers were kind of neighborhood broker, not maybe just a small neighborhood, but like a large area, and then you had a couple smaller ones, but like there was always a couple dominant players, but they weren't like statewide hundreds of agents like today.
Yeah.
They weren't like that. And so, but now, with technology, um, broker commissions keep getting compressed, but when I first got into business, you had to have a broker. I mean, because, you know, you, plat books, there was no online plat. There was like a shelf full of books, big, thick books. So you couldn't afford to just buy them. And then you had a microfiche machine that you had to have all those microfiche pieces equipment to do research, and now, so, you had to have a broker supply all that. And now, the broker doesn't have to supply that. So their commissions keep getting compressed and their areas keep getting bigger. And they just become, more of like just places to park a license, And so, I'm not in agreement with the way it's run out there. I don't like it, you know.
Well, I don't either, and I mean that's why it's like there's some transitions going on with me, and it's I don't know. I don't know how it will switch, but
Right.
there's be a lot of course pushback, and everyone talks about technology, and but even I have opinions there. Like AI is not going to replace my job. I know
No,
that it's not going.
it's just going to help you write comments faster.
Yeah, it might help me with marketing, but in the end, people want a person.
Oh yeah.
Well, I say this for anyone who somehow listens to this. I mentioned AI, and it's like, oh, we're going to lose agents because technology. No, here's
You
the
may
thing:
lose some.
if a certain like some of your support staff, but there's a couple big companies that have these iBuyer models that have been trying to do it for 10 or 15 years. If they haven't
Right.
figured it out by now, I don't think they're going to figure it out anytime soon.
Microsoft in the mid 90s made a run at real estate. And after spending millions of dollars, millions, they came to the conclusion that real estate is an offline transaction and we're out.
Huh? I've never heard that. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Because the business, I mean, to control it is controlling the data. you know, because
Right.
what the problem is, the technology companies, what they don't understand is the human factor.
Right.
Because every time there's this new way of doing it, it's usually some tech guy that's trying to make it an efficient process. But that, but there was, they never consider the human problem, of emotions and
Exactly.
you got the husband, wife, three kids, cat, dog, and turtle. They don't consider that. And here's what happens, right? So there's always somebody coming into the marketplace. They got a newer and better way of doing it. And then what happens is, they thrive in a boom market. But then as soon as there's a shift, they're gone. And then what happens is, although they're gone, their technology remains. And then the people that are know how to run a real estate practice, they get to acquire the technology, and then they actually improve. Rather than trying to replace somebody, they make improvements.
Right. Oh yeah.
And that happens every cycle.
Yeah, and I totally agree, but it's never going to be just a strictly technological
No.
thing. It's not possible. Well, it's like I read an article this morning about I don't even remember the name of the business, but basically fired like 90% of their customer support staff because they've got all these AI systems, but they're getting all these complaints from clients who are like, my
Right.
problem is very specific and I can't get someone to talk to me. So they're canceling. It's like a subscription thing. And people are
Right.
canceling in droves. And I'm like, they're never, I don't know. I don't think they're ever going to 100% figure that out.
No.
You have
Well,
these new,
that's a technology mindset.
yeah. Well, they have these AI things where it's like, oh, well, they'll add in stutters and uhs and breaths, but people are going to figure it out. You
Oh
can't.
yeah.
Here's the thing. I don't have a big, my dad was a computer guy. My dad's in 70s, so he did like mainframes and such.
Right.
So I kind of grew up around, but I'm not a tech guy in that sense or really any sense. But the problem with a lot of modern business, and this is big in the tech industry, is they think people are dumb.
Right.
People are not dumb. Now, people take a lot, which
They
they
might
probably,
be lack of experience, but
yeah,
that doesn't mean that has nothing to do with intelligence.
yeah. And at some point, the consumer base pushes back.
Right.
I mean, and not to try to get political or anyway, but we've seen that right now in our market, when it comes to a lot of media or, things that have been politicized, the consumer base pushed back.
Right.
And that will happen with technology.
Right.
And it
At some
happens.
point.
Yeah, it will happen, I think. Um, but I guess just to tie it back into real estate, I think for me, I mean, just kind of your general things if you always want to keep learning and improving. But my big thing now is just trying to not only get more business always, but to hire a couple people to help me, but also make the business systems and processes always more efficient, which is
Right.
what those tech people are trying to do too. I mean, because there's nothing wrong with those. Those are good things you want to do. You always want to,
Right. Yeah. You want to streamline everything,
yeah,
and and having, the key is to have, so one of the coaching programs I subscribe to, they call it SWET, SWET. So, which stands for same way every time, and that's a system, so, they just boil it down to where, and then when you do sweat like that, then you can improve every little nuance. But if you don't do it the same way every time, how do you make improvements? Because you don't know what works better and what doesn't work better. Now you may do something and say, look, we need to change how we do this. That's fine. Now you do the same thing every time with the new way of doing it.
it makes me think of, because I've used this example. Years ago when I was in college, I worked for Arby's, right?
Right.
I'll tell you, and fast food is fascinating to me
Right.
because you talk about something that is the same every time and efficient. In the end, at Arby's, you pretty much had the same sandwich. The roast beef was always the same. It's just how much
Right.
you put on it,
What
and
kind of bread and what kind of dressings?
the same process every time.
Right.
Assembly line, and it was so efficient. It was amazing.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
there are certain parts of the day where they knew, like, hey, at 11, I mean, I remember this, and this has been a number of years. At 11:35, not 11:30, not
Right.
11:40, 11:35, you start making curly fries.
Right.
That way,
They
we're
had it figured out.
they just knew all this stuff.
Right.
And it's fascinating. And it always is in my mind, like they figured this out because it's a business.
Right. A
It's
little later and you wouldn't have had enough too soon and they wouldn't been as
had
hot
to
or
throw some
fresh.
out. Yeah,
Right.
because they can only keep them under the heat for so
Right. For
long.
so long. Right.
Or people complain and all that stuff. So they just
Right.
knew 35s when you
They
start.
had the sweets. That's amazing, isn't it? I mean, I love that kind of nerdy stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Like I always tell people, you know, something that revolutionized profit in a corporation was, you know, was like, would you like to upsize that or big, you know, would you like to, you know, for 50 cents more, you can get it bigger, right? People kind of let, you know, as a script at say, you know, McDonald's, right? But if you think about it, let's say a typical order is $5 and you have, you know, you have $1 of real estate for rent, $1 material, $1 labor, and what was it? So rent, material, oh, marketing and labor, and $1 profit.
Right.
Well, if you got somebody to upsize and they spent 50 cents more, well, if your cost was like 10 cents more, so your profit increased by 40 cents. But what they don't realize is the profit was already a dollar. And if you went from a dollar to $1.40, you just increased your profit by 40%. That's huge. I mean, that little thought process, the upsell, like revolutionized profit. And and now they all do it. Everybody does that. And no matter where
Oh,
you go, you know, servers in a restaurant, would you like a dessert? They're all upselling. But that all started in the fast food business, or at least that I know of.
yeah, it's interesting. My brother is a like a regional manager for Wendy's, so we've talked some about that. It's fascinating business,
Right. Oh yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing. When it comes to the real estate business, I probably get more inspiration outside of the real estate business for my business.
Right,
And
right, right.
because I can't really find anyone that's focusing on the areas I'm in. I mean, there's a few and in other parts of the
Right,
country, but you kind of, I think to really innovate, you have to look a little bit outside of your industry.
right. Well, and it's always good to look outside your industry, you
Yeah.
know, because there's just people doing things a certain way. You're like, man, if we did that, we, you know, that would be awesome to do that,
Hmm.
you know. So, you know, like your playlist. I mean, I'm definitely going to steal that idea and do. I mean, I have these videos and stuff. Now, I did that when I was a broker. I had all these training videos for agents, but
Right.
you know, now I'll do it with, you know, like I had a series called Know Thy Repsy. You know, it was like 33 videos that walked an agent through a Repsy. And then even at night, you know, if they're working on if they had a situation, they could always log into the site and just go to video 22 and watch it for 3 minutes and 4 minutes and hear me explaining that clause to them.
Well, and I think that's it's been around for a little bit in other industries, but real estate still hasn't done that.
No,
It,
not at a high level.
no, and that's a problem. Is well, it's like people who still want to do newsletters and still want to do blogs. I mean, I hate to burst people's bubbles, but people don't read for the most part. I mean, I'm not
Not too
saying,
much. No.
but you know what? They'll watch a 2 minute video.
Right.
They'll watch a 2 minute video over a 2 minute over reading a 2 minute blog. They just
Yeah. Some will. I mean, I like to read because sometimes I can read it faster than this blogger. I mean, this
I can too,
vlogger, you know?
but I'm thinking about the average
Yeah.
consumer.
Yeah. No,
You
I
know,
know.
you
And
know.
that's a challenge sometimes because, yeah, because some things that never work on me, like works on the masses. I'm like, well, who the hell would have thought of that? You know, not
Right.
me.
Yeah, I have another little saying I say is do the opposite of what everyone else is doing and you'll find success.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Figure out where everybody else is going, go the other way because most people are broke. So,
Yeah, so it's been interesting and um it's a good time and I think I'll keep growing because I'll tell you the biggest I think we all have fears and I can admit this like my fear is the business declining but I know if I have these lead pillars that are in these niches I'll never
right.
have as long as like, I don't know, I don't.
No, you may go down in volume, but because everything went down, so therefore you go down. You know, all ships rise and lower with the tide,
Right.
and that's just the way it is, you know, and
Kind
it's
of the,
okay to be that way. You just have to recognize where the tide is, and and don't shift because the tide went out. You just got to stay the course, and then when the tide comes back in, you'll be in great shape.
I agree with that. It's funny how many people don't adjust though. I heard this stat. I'm curious if you've heard this too. If there's any merit to it. I heard that in Utah, 68% of loan officers didn't renew their license this year.
Yeah, I've heard. I don't know how high it is because I don't know what the numbers were, but and it makes sense because see, lending is different than real estate because real estate there's a certain number of transactions. That's it. Now with lending, because the transaction volume is down, so there goes the purchase volume, but also but purchase volume is only down like 10, 15, 20, maybe 20%, but refi volume is down like 75%. So a lot of people get in the mortgage business during the refi booms because they're just making money hand over fist.
Mm-hmm.
And then so rates rise at 2% and they're all gone. Because they never learned to do purchase business. Purchase business is a different animal. And those that focus on purchase business have longevity. Because when refis dry up, your purchase business will carry you through. There's always people moving regardless. Now there's still refi business out there, believe it or not, because even though mortgage rates are up, but guess what else went up greater than mortgage rates? HELOCs, credit cards, boats, all that stuff, especially anything that's like tied to an index adjustable, like HELOCs are like 9 and 10% right now. And so credit cards are 15 up to 22%. So if people are sitting on, they have a ton of equity and they have all these debts, they can still refinance. And, some of them save them $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
Now the key is don't go back in debt again. Instead of, let's redo your debt to where your payment's $1,000 a month lower. Then take that $1,000 you would have paid and attack that mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll actually pay it off faster than if you would have tried to pay off everything else.
Right.
So there's still a refinancing out there.
Yeah. Oh, and then for non-QM loans, if you want to refinance eventually into like a conventional loan,
Right.
because those interest rates are higher than your standard interest rate.
Right.
And I think there's a fair amount of those loans out there for self-employed people that
Right.
exist.
Yeah, the self-employed is not quite as bad as your standard non-QM, even though
Right.
they're non-QM, because typically self-employed loans, we call them bank statement loans,
Right.
so they're still proving their income because the bank's just not going to loan you money.
Yeah. I mean,
You got to prove income.
oh, I've had a bank statement loan. I know that
Oh yeah,
process.
I've done them.
Well, well for me it was okay. I do this and pay a little higher interest rate, or I'm going to pay the government $1,000
Right,
back.
exactly. It's cheaper to pay a higher rate than it because you can even deduct a higher rate. And
Exactly.
that's the other thing with these people. You got a HELOC because you can only deduct the interest of a HELOC if the money was used to improve the property.
Mm-hmm.
So if you took a HELOC and kind of blew it away, and then you have credit card debt and a boat loan, if you move all that into a mortgage and lower your payment, and you enjoy a higher tax benefit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
There's options out there.
oh yeah,
There's always options.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, this is good stuff, man. So yeah, we just hit an hour. I don't know if you know. I mean, it went by like that.
I don't even think I knew. Yeah, wow. I guess
Well, I
it
keep a clock in front of me, so because I know, I mean, the attention span is not that great. Some people listen to them all at once. Some people, they just listen to them over a period of a couple of days. Because I publish one a week. So I sent out that email. It's funny. I sent out that email, I was able to, I have a, well, we'll talk about it afterwards. But, but anyway, let me ask you this. Is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
I can't think of anything. I mean, I pretty much covered my business and just what
Sure.
I just a lot of different thoughts. I can't think of anything
Right.
specific.
So if someone wanted to say, hey, I'm working in a niche or I am already in that niche and they wanted to get a hold of you, how would they get a hold of you?
Oh, I mean, it's best if they probably reach out to me on Facebook,
Okay.
just Stephen Hughes. Of course, they could text or call me. My number's 901-517-0969. If you want to just get to know me or even know some of the niche stuff, I mean, it's on my YouTube channel. Just look up Stephen Hughes Hardship Real Estate Pro. So you don't even have
So
to
what
call
is it? Stephen Hughes, what?
Stephen Hughes Hardship Real Estate Pro.
Got it.
Yeah, and then that's probably the best way to get to know me.
Right. Or to
Outside
at
of
least get to know your niches.
know my niches, correct.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So, hey, I've really enjoyed this. I mean, I love hanging around, with other realtors and agents, I mean, even though my focus is lending, I still have a real estate license,
Yeah.
you know, but I mean, I'll do, if somebody calls me up, one of my old database and says they want to sell a house, well, duh, you know, but my
Yeah.
focus is on loans, So, well, anyway, well, thanks for being here, Stephen. And hey, thanks for listening, folks. Again, this is Rob Aubrey with Aubrey Home Loans, or well, productive agent powered by Aubrey Home Loans. There you go. So we don't. So my outro is not a pre-recorded outro that we tag on there. It's just me muddling my way through it. So anyway, thanks again, folks.